Sigmund Freud was the first one to propose the self-defense mechanism theory, which has evolved over time. These strategies come from the idea of psychoanalytic theory, the psychological perspective of personality that see personality as the relation of three components, which are the id or the ID, ego, and also superego.
Freud's theory managed to help us to understand the two structures of personality in the theory. The first structure is the ID. It is the unconscious part of our mind. The second structure is the ego, which is the conscious part of our mind. And the last but not least, it is the superego, which also the unconscious part of our mind. The study also helped us to acknowledge that the constant conflict between the ID and also the superego. It is very important for us to resolve the conflict between the ID, the ego, and also the superego, so that we can avoid unhappiness and also mental distress in our daily life.
Fraud defense mechanism is correlated with our personality. Okay, so by looking at this picture, we can see that the devil represents the id, which contains the idea of bad or pleasure oriented, and is placed on our unconscious mind, while the angel represents the superego, which contains the idea of good and is placed in our pre-conscious mind. So our conscious state is representing the ego, where it acts like a moderator to make compromises to satisfy both id and the superego, and it will provide a place to debate our internal conflicts that will shape our personalities. So does Freud theory still relevant in today's society? Yes. According to the JALIUN International University, they stated that his theory is still relevant, but only as a reference point. Freud's modern contribution applies more to attitudes. He established a foundation where the medical healthcare unit is built, and modern attitude that is involved in the mental health process is seemingly to be taken from his main thesis. This reflects on the difference between what we say of ourselves and what we really are. Therefore, defense mechanism is very beneficial in protecting our civilized self from our primary self.
There are 10 types of self-defense mechanism that is proposed by Sigmund Freud. The first one is denial. Denial is when we are not recognizing or acknowledging a threatening situation. For example, a cancer patient might deny the fact or refuse to believe that he or she is not going to live long. Secondly is repression. Repression is when we are pushing a threatening situation out of our conscious mind. For example, a little boy saw a very horrible murder in front of his eyes. Therefore, he lost that part of memory because he repressed that event. Thirdly is rationalization. Rationalization is when we are giving acceptable excuses for our unacceptable behavior. For example, a boy got a bad examination result. Therefore, he blamed his teacher for giving so much advanced questions instead of blaming his lack of preparation. The fourth one is projection. Projection is when you are placing your own unacceptable thoughts onto others, as if that unacceptable thoughts belong to that person instead of yours. For example, you have a best friend, and your best friend has a close friend. However, you dislike that close friend, but you treat that close friend as polite as you can for the sake of your best friend. As time goes by, you started to think that the close friend is disliking you too. because you are projecting your own unacceptable thoughts onto the close friend. This is maybe due to the fact that you are feeling guilty for having that kind of feelings or thoughts towards the close friend. Hence, you create your own reason for your unacceptable thoughts. The fifth one is reaction formation. Reaction formation is when you are forming a behavior or reaction that is opposite to your unacceptable actual thoughts. For example, you are treating the person that you hate the most with a friendly manner. And other than that, another example is a gay man is oftenly criticizing the homosexual community to hide his actual sexuality.
The next self-defense mechanism is displacement, where someone would channel their feelings onto a less threatening target instead of the real target. So, for example, Lily come back home from work feeling angry with her coworker, so she channels her anger to her husband instead. The next one is regression, which is falling back onto childlike patterns in a way of coping with their stressful situations. For example, an adult may come back home to their stuffed animals in order to find comfort. The next one is identification, in which someone will try to become someone else in order to cope with their anxiety. For example, Lily may really admire Sandra, so she tries to be like Sandra in a way of dressing or in the way of she talks to everyone. The next one is compensation, in which someone will try to make up for an area that they lack of by being superior in another area. So, for example, I am not good in mathematics, so I try to make it up by being good at English language. The last self-defense mechanism is sublimation, in which someone turns something that is unacceptable in the society to something that is acceptable. So, for example, someone who may have trouble with coping with their anger will try to channel their anger through things that are acceptable in the society, such as painting or maybe being a martial arts.
To conclude, self-defense mechanisms are actually the strategies that we humans unconsciously use to protect ourselves. Suggestion regarding this mechanism actually help us to understand how this process works.